Apple has gone crawling back to X, but it might actually signal a bigger shift with Google being dethroned. We have YouTube absolutely dominating podcasts and TVs, and we have Meta that has decided they want to read our private text now. This is the Act 18 show. Hey, I'm Jason, faith-based entrepreneur and full-time digital nomad, coming to you from a 13 square foot apartment in Tokyo. I'll be here another week. This is really pushing the boundaries of living out of a suitcase. So timestamps and sources below, along with the link to today's sponsor, our digital product launch kit. More on that in a bit. Now, a special note on the timestamps, we're actually going to do all the YouTube stuff last because it wound up taking quite a while to record, and I just tried my best to make it short, but I couldn't. So if you clicked and you just want to see the YouTube the YouTube updates, use the timestamps below to skip to that. I don't want to be clickbaity with the thumbnail because I think we're going to put that on the thumbnail. But anyway, let's go ahead and kick things off with Apple. Now, Apple has apparently gone back to advertising on X, and I think this is big for two reasons. Number one, X needs the revenue, and number two, Apple might be actually gearing up to dethrone Google when it comes to search. So we'll go through the first one. Now, X, of course, lost a ton of upfront revenue, gross revenue, when Elon took over. Essentially, all the advertisers were like, we don't like what Elon has to say. This free speech thing sucks, so we're going to leave. And this chart clearly shows that in 2021, X's revenue went from 500 million down to 2.7. Even though it lost almost half its revenue, it actually wound up making more money because Elon, whether you like or hate him, is a really good entrepreneur, and he knows how to trim the fat and make sure that profits still go up, even if top line revenue is down. So just a lesson in sometimes it's about cutting your expenses or streamlining your operations as opposed to just trying to get more in the door. And of course, with tax season coming up, it's an awesome time to look at all those subscriptions you don't actually need. And I know I just found one the other day and I was like, why am I paying $25 for this? I thought I canceled it. But the bigger shift, I think, here has to do with the fact that Google, of course, has been essentially labeled a monopoly. And I think because the U.S. government has essentially said, hey, Google, you can't pay Apple billions of dollars a year to be the default search on Safari. I think this opens the door for Apple to finally seriously take a look at making their own search engine, because at this point, Apple probably has enough, well, not probably, they're one of the most valuable companies in the world, right? They have the ability, the manpower, and of course, most importantly, the reserves to build their own. So I think the fact that they've come back to X, specifically advertising Safari, is a pretty ninja move because number one, X, of course, is full of people who don't want to be tracked and are concerned about those types of things. And then number two, it sets them up for having a nice large user base to just quietly shift Google out, move Google out and put in their own search engine. Of course, this is assuming that they can fix Apple Intelligence, because apparently the implementation of AI with Apple News didn't go too well. They had a bunch of fake, just totally random fake stories showing up. Now, next up, we have Meta. So Meta has essentially said, hey, we don't get enough of your information. We need just a little more. So if you use AI in any of the Facebook chats, it's going to read everything in there. Now, Meta, of course, says it doesn't read everything, but would you really trust Meta to say like, oh, we're only going to read like the last 5 messages? Probably not. So I include this in here, not because it's going to help with your business or content, but just in terms of, hey, maybe keep those private conversations in, Telegram, Signal, or WhatsApp. And of course, I should add an asterisk. Of course, Telegram doesn't automatically encrypt everything. So make sure that if you're having those conversations, they're in one of those other apps and not AI, because anyone in that group chat, as soon as they use AI inside of that chat, AI is going to see everything. And speaking of AI, in an ironic twist of, hey, we stole your stuff, but now you can use AI to recreate the stuff we stole, apparently Meta has some sort of collaboration with artists at a Paris summit. And I'm just including this here because I think it's just ridiculously comical that these AI companies are trying to turn around and collaborate with artists after they borrowed all of their stuff. Now, I am firmly in the camp of they did something wrong. They got away with it. It stinks, but we have to move on. I know a lot of artists and creators are just like totally against AI and think anyone that uses AI is stealing. And I think you can make a moral argument for that. And as wrong as I think the development of the technology was in terms of just taking stuff, that's nothing new for Silicon Valley. It's nothing new for these apps. Google started off by doing something that was categorically illegal at the time. And they just said, oh, sorry, but here's a cool search engine. So you can either use the technology because it's here to stay, or you can, stay on the moral high horse and figure out how to work and thrive in a world where everyone else is using it. I'm doing my best not to kind of push you into one or the other, but I think those are kind of the two options we have at this point, which actually leads us into today's sponsor, the Digital Product Launch Kit. So this is a long time in the making. This is a elegant one-shot system to come up with a digital product idea, actually create the sales copy, completely outline it, create it, and launch it. It's the same system I've been using for a couple years now to launch multiple, digital products, whether it's a $5 template, $20 ebook, or even a $95 workshop. You can go ahead and check that out in the description. Now, next up, we have X is apparently going to be giving us payments, so you can send and receive money via X with a QR code. Not quite sure what they were thinking there, but okay. Next up, we have BuzzFeed launching their own social media app. I just think it's funny every time a company goes, we don't like the way social media works, so we're just going to build our own and be better. Hardly ever works out. And if you happen to be using Google Workspace or paying for Google Workspace, you probably actually have access to Gemini. I'm sharing this here because I feel so dumb. I apparently had Gemini for months and I had no idea as part of my Workspace subscription. So apparently I'm paying $20 a month to GPT for nothing. And on the subject of GPT, it was the #1 downloaded app in the App Store for January. So if you feel like you're late to the AI game, don't worry. There are apparently 10 million other people who are just starting to use AI as well. I really think AI is here to stay. So definitely worth at least choosing one of these models and actually starting to learn how to use it in your workflow. Now, finally, we have some YouTube updates. And of course, I'm including this at the end because it wound up being a long one. So we'll cut to earlier where my voice was not about to die, and we'll go through the YouTube updates. Now, next up, we have YouTube and some big updates for what the YouTube CEO is looking to in 2025 and beyond. #1, YouTube is apparently now the #1 place for podcasts. I think this is a huge shift that we're seeing in terms of long form content. I don't know how to say long form that's longer, is actually gaining a lot of traction and attention. And I think we're seeing this shift where we have short form over here that's like 60 seconds or less, and then we've got like long form that's like around 2 hours, right? And if you're making content in the middle, you seem to be getting crushed for some reason. But what I think is really cool about this, and the next update data YouTube had, is essentially showing like, hey, if you're not making short form content right now, don't freak out. People are still watching long form content. They still want longer videos and longer conversations, because especially as AI becomes more prolific, it's definitely going to hit short form way harder than, like, let's say having AI write a fake hour, 90-minute podcast, right? So I think it's kind of AI proofing your content as well if you're looking to start a podcast. And of course, Spotify and iTunes also allow for video uploads as well. And so, for example, for this show, we take the YouTube version, and then we eventually upload the video to Spotify, and then Spotify can actually syndicate that over to iTunes. So it makes the whole process a whole lot easier and simple. Now, before we dive into the crazy stat when it comes to YouTube on TV, just wanted to note here that, interestingly, the CEO actually mentioned the watching of political content, and of course, Joe Rogan's interview with now President Trump, which I think is a pretty big shift because when President Trump first got elected, YouTube essentially went off the guardrails because they were like, oh my gosh, we helped elect a person that we don't like. And so now we got to like super censorship everything that we don't agree with is the best way I could put it, right? And so now we're seeing a shift where YouTube's like, okay, well, maybe we'll just let people who aren't saying things that we don't agree with too much or disagree with too much to be on our platform. And so even though they have a clear history of suppressing political conversations, now it seems like they want to use that as part of their strength. Now, I think if we can, I did a comment the other day, if we could get up to like 90% free speech on YouTube, I think light is always the best disinfectant. So whether or not you do political content, you want to see political content, I do think it's a good idea to have more conversations so that bad ideas really can be seen and come to light as opposed to being pushed off to other platforms that none of us actually engage with. So at least we can understand what's out there. And when it comes time to vote, whether you're in the States or someplace else, you understand all of the ideas and you can go, I really don't like that idea and I'm going to vote against it, right? That's the beauty of a democracy. So the next big shift here is that apparently there are 1 billion hours of content is consumed on TVs via YouTube. There was definitely a better way to say that. So long story short, you're not missing out if you're only doing horizontal or long form videos, right? Like there's still a huge audience for that. I think the types of videos that are doing well is shifting on YouTube for sure, but it is crazy to see that YouTube is actually getting more attention and more watch hours on TVs than it is on mobile, which is just crazy. I also quickly looked up some stats. This isn't because mobile is dropping. So mobile is still going up. It's still not, the level of Reels or TikToks, but it is YouTube Shorts still gets a lot of attention. So that doesn't mean give up on Shorts. You still got to try and figure that whole game out, but it does show that you really aren't missing out on audience or growth or revenue if you're only doing vertical long form content because people are watching on their TVs. I think what this might mean though is 4K might actually be worth the headache. Personally, I stopped doing 4K. It was just the file sizes were just so freaking annoying, but maybe I have to. Maybe I have to go back to that. Who knows? Now, we'll quickly go through the rest of the updates here. The other cool thing that they pointed out in this is that channel memberships are up 40%. So that means people are getting much more comfortable supporting individual creators. I think that's awesome. I still think you should use something like Systemi.io to have your own, to own your revenue stream. I don't think partnering with YouTube is a good long-term strategy, but if you're just starting, it's awesome because it saves you a ton of headache trying to set up your own membership site. And of course, it saves you a couple $100 a month, right? On software, if you're going with something like School or Circle, which I'm not a huge fan of. But something else that's interesting is they are seeing an uptick in creators making money outside of ads and YouTube Premium. Of course, shopping is becoming a big thing. The only disadvantage with the shopping links, though, is that you pretty much have to be using a Shopify store, which is hard if you sell digital products. And then, despite all the negative comments I've gotten about this new feature, auto dubbing, what is it? I'll just read it. For videos with dubbed audio, more than 40% of the total watch time comes from viewers choosing to listen in a dubbed language. So this is really pushing, I guess, really just breaking down the language barriers, where time will tell how successful this is going to be. So thank you so much for watching. Sincerely hope you got some value out of this episode. So until the next, keep building the business you love.